I had to give birth to an identical version of my daughter without a skull and without a brain. And I would have had to hold her until she died.
That woman was one of 14 women and 2 doctors who are now suing the state of Texas over their 6-week abortion ban. The women are suing not to attempt to repeal the law, but to clarify what the law actually entails, because the vague and broad wording of that bill essentially leads to doctors being so terrified to perform abortions on women who do not have viable fetuses, meaning they will deliver stillborns or they will deliver infants that will die hours after the delivery. I mean, it is tragic, traumatic to say the least. And so in this lawsuit, you see women take the stand to testify about their personal experiences and how, what they went through was not only traumatic because of what they had to experience in seeing, their baby born with all sorts of issues, their baby die hours after it was born, but also put their own health and their own lives at risk. And the reason why the doctors aren't performing the abortions is because they don't want to make a mistake and then get prosecuted under what the current laws in Texas happen to be. Now, what are the laws? Under the law in Texas, doctors who perform abortions risk life in prison and also fines of up to $100,000. Opponents say that has left some women with providers who are unwilling to even discuss terminating a pregnancy. Again, even a non-viable pregnancy. So, although Texas's ban narrowly allows exceptions when the patient's life is in danger, again, the providers here, the abortion providers, don't want to take the risk. One of the women who testified ended up becoming physically ill during her testimony. I want to give you some details about who she is before we go to the video. Samantha Cassiano testified she was halfway through her pregnancy when she found out during an appointment that her daughter had a rare diagnosis of encephaly, where much of the skull and brain is missing. Doctors told her they could not provide her an abortion in Texas, and when a caseworker was called into the room, Cassiano was handed funeral home information. So with that context in mind, let's go to her testimony.
Another plaintiff recalled the moment that she learned her pregnancy was not viable.
And I can see her pain in her eyes. And she told me that my daughter has been diagnosed with anencephaly, and that means that her skull and her brain is not fully developed. And that she was sorry, and I didn't have any option. I was pregnant. She then called in a caseworker. Caseworker came in. And they handed me a paper that said funeral homes on top of it. She told me that I didn't have any options because there was a law that the Texas abortion law prohibited it. I wasn't able to get one. So I felt like I was abandoned. Yes.
That woman grew so distressed on the stand. You see her there. She started to vomit.
Her baby gasped for air for 4 hours after she was born, and then she died. And she said this, all she could do was fight to try to get air. I had to watch my daughter go from being pink to red to purple, from being warm to cold. I just kept telling myself and my baby that I'm so sorry that this had to happen to you.
Okay, so this is what happens when big government comes in and takes decisions out of the hands of doctors and parents. How would the government know what the status of that fetus is? How? Is it a doctor? Is it in every room as they're doing the medical tests? Of course not. No, Republicans told us they were against big government our whole lives, and then they have big government intrude in the most personal decisions that people make. And it's not just about women's freedom. And by the way, again, this is a party that told us they were in favor of freedom. Does this look like freedom to you? But it's also for all parents. The parents are making the decision together very oftentimes, and they say, oh, I trust the doctor. This isn't a pro-life issue. This baby is not going to be born alive anyway, or is not going to survive. And the government says, we don't believe you, we don't care. We don't care, suffer. And by the way, most of these women want the baby. And they say, well, if you want a baby, you're gonna have to suffer through this miscarriage. You're gonna have to suffer through your baby dying. You're gonna have to suffer through all of this. And you're gonna have to wait till the fetus is dead inside of you. I mean, what a sick, sick thing for the government to say. And Republicans, what happened to parents' rights? When you're attacking people who are LGBTQ, all of a sudden you're all about parents' rights. And when parents say, I would like to make the most crucial decision for our family, you go, no, I don't give a goddamn about parents' rights. You'll do what big government tells you to do.
So look, the response to your question, Cenk, from conservatives who consider themselves or fancy themselves pro-life is no, but the bill says that there are exceptions for medical issues, right? But the lawmakers heard the complaints ahead of time about how the wording of the legislation was too broad, it was too vague, it was going to create a chilling effect in the state where providers were gonna be too terrified to take any chances. But they ignored that feedback, they ignored that critique because it's not about, by the way, look, I get it, some are gonna argue that I'm being unfair, but like, let's just keep it real. For months, that was the argument, and they ignored that argument because they don't care. For a lot of these politicians, they're doing what they think is gonna help them get reelected. They don't actually care about the issue. Are there some genuine pro-life politicians? Sure. But if you're genuinely pro-life, how do you account for the fact that there was legitimate critique about how this bill was written that puts the mother's life at risk in a lot of cases? If you're pro-life, do you not care about the life of the mother here? Wouldn't you want to ensure that the wording of the legislation is clear enough to ensure that the woman's life is not at risk because of a provider refusing to provide an abortion for a non-viable fetus? So
look, critics of the bill argued that it was gonna have a chilling effect, and it did. So who was right and who was wrong? So if you're a Republican and you say, well, yeah, it did have a chilling effect, but I was lying, I don't really care that it has a chilling effect. I want them to go through this. Okay, well, that's at least clear and honest, right? If you're a Republican who say, no, I don't want women to go through this isn't what I bargained for, well, then why don't you pressure they're not our lawmakers, they're your lawmakers. Why don't you pressure them to, at a bare minimum, it's still, the law would still be against abortion, but at least to clarify it so you don't have this monstrosity, right? And right now, I don't see any effort in that direction. And part of the problem is what Anna mentioned, because politicians are not real people. They have different incentives. Their incentive is not to pass the best law, it's to get reelected. And how do they get reelected? Sure, in most of the cases it's about money. And in this case, there's some grassroots money that comes in and some billionaire money, but that's not the main thing here. The main thing in this case is they're gonna get graded by special interest groups. And that's how the NRA bullied the, both parties for a long time and now just the Republican Party. In this case, the maximalist groups, the special interest groups that want maximum for that side, goes, oh yeah, they're dying inside the womb, love it, don't worry about it. If you vote against this bill, we're gonna grade you an F. And then we're gonna tell everybody that you're pro-choice and that you respect women's freedom. You'll never get elected in a Republican primary. And they get scared to death of the grade, so they go, okay, could get maximum. Don't take away all their rights. We don't care, endanger their lives, who cares? I just want the right grade so I can do misleading advertising when I'm running.
Yeah, and the people who are caught in the middle are mothers, patients. And look, this is why it makes sense to keep abortion legal in all stages. Even though I myself, I am against, and most people in this country are against aborting a healthy pregnancy in the third trimester. But abortions in the third trimester of healthy pregnancies very rarely happen, and providers don't provide abortions for that. I give you that because if there is a problem with the pregnancy, and you live in a state that has banned the abortion for even the third trimester, let's say it's legal all the way up to the third trimester. Okay, but then what happens when the doctor realizes, okay, this is a risky pregnancy?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have to prove it? Is there a government official you go to? They should take an oath to ensure that they're only performing this on a non-viable fetus, in the third trimester. But again, the main point here is that this has to do with healthcare, and it has to do with the most intimate and personal decision a woman and her family can possibly make. And it should be left to her and her doctor.
I want to be absolutely clear about this. A lot of people now have the misimpression, both on the right and the left, that Roe v. Wade meant that you could have an abortion all the way through your pregnancy, and now the Republicans have this insane, mental claim that it allowed for post-birth abortions, which is not even a thing. You guys just made that up 100%. It's unbelievable that you would say something post-birth abortion. It doesn't even make any logical sense. Anyways, but you cannot go up to 9 months according to Roe v. Wade. And so the distinction that Anna's making is between how do we make it super clear that a doctor and a woman have a right to do life-saving surgery in the last trimester, as opposed to an elective abortion. And so Roe v. Wade and most of the blue states, if not all of them, actually do not allow you to do a third trimester abortion if it's elective. And so that was the law of the land, and now that has been reversed, and that's why you're seeing all these laws. But don't buy into the hype that the blue states or that the Democratic position, the left-wing position,
that the mainstream left-wing position,
or Roe v. Wade meant that you could have an abortion at any time. No, it prohibited in the third trimester for elective abortions.
So final thing I have to add is, now that this anti-abortion law has been in effect, we're starting to see an increase in infant mortality. And it's because providers are unable and unwilling, because they're terrified, to perform the abortions on a non-viable fetus. So in these cases, women have no choice but to deliver a stillborn or an infant that dies hours later. And so I want to give you those numbers. Some 2,200 infants died in Texas in 2022, and that's an increase of 227 deaths, or 11.5% over the previous year. And that's according to preliminary infant mortality data from the Texas Department of State Health Services.
What part of that is pro-life?
Infant deaths caused by severe genetic and birth defects rose by 21.6%. That spike reversed a nearly decade-long decline. Between 2014 and 2021, infant deaths had fallen by nearly 15%. And look, there is one caveat that I want to add, just to be completely fair. So apparently the increase in deaths could partly be explained by the fact that more babies are being born in Texas because abortions are not available in Texas at this point. One recent report found that in the final 9 months of 2022, the state saw nearly 10,000 more births than expected prior to its abortion ban, an estimated 3% increase. However, doctors in the state who focus on high-risk pregnancies are saying that the law absolutely has had an impact on increasing infant mortality in the state. Erica Werner, who is with Tufts Medical Center, says this: "We all knew the infant mortality rate would go up because many of these terminations were for pregnancies that don't turn into healthy, normal kids. It's exactly what we were concerned about. And that is exactly what the critics of the bill repeated over and over again. But the lawmakers didn't care, didn't listen, didn't change the wording of the legislation, and moved forward with it."